I think Facebook has lost the PR battle by enforcing a ban that's just simply too wide. I think people sort of understood on some vague level that this was going on. Most people who use Facebook would have no idea really, but I think that Facebook using an algorithm to ban not just accepted commercial news sites, but all sorts of other sites as well, has meant that Australians have lost access through Facebook to things like the weather, things like emergency services notifications, which in a time where some of Australia is bracing for bushfires, some people are still looking for information about the pandemic. I think it's a massive overreach, and I think if Facebook was hoping this would remind Australians how important Facebook is, I think really they're going to remind that Facebook does things without considering the consequences on its users.
Indeed, it's an excellent point, and I wonder whether even if Facebook does eventually reach a compromise and stay in Australia, whether there might be people who turn away from Facebook because of this. I'm going to steal a quote from my good friend and news commentator Nikki Gemmell, who tweeted this morning, "Where is the Mark Zuckerberg of Australia to create a homegrown social media platform?" So my question is, do we actually even need Facebook?
I have to say, well, I think a homegrown Australian Facebook might be a bit of a stretch. At the same time, I think many people have migrated to other social media platforms. To be fair, Facebook does own some of them, so it does own Instagram, it does own WhatsApp, and it hasn't enforced the ban on those yet. But at the same time, I think Facebook's fortunes were already declining a little bit in Australia, and I think this is going to accelerate that decline rather than the opposite, which is what I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg was looking for.
So what do you think is the most likely outcome at this stage, and is what Facebook doing possibly just a negotiating tactic?
I think it is a negotiating tactic, and I think eventually the wording of the legislation will be tweaked slightly further, and that Facebook will probably effectively do what Google has done, which is try and get some deals in place that move around the code rather than being enacted because of the code itself. But at the same time, Google has moved very quickly and got a whole lot of deals in place this week. Facebook hasn't, and I think Facebook going hard by itself when Google has decided to play ball is going to work against them.